want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's November 30th, 2021. It's post Black Friday. It's post Cyber Monday, which means it's Knee Jerks Tuesday, Greg. So, welcome to the Knee Jerks, Detroit sports talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation. Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger who suddenly forgot his name for a split second there. Joining me as always. See what happens when we're off the show for a month? You know, I forget how to do things. Now I'm like Homer Simpson when he says, "Yeah, I learned the name of a wine and I forgot how to drive," or something like that. So. But joining me as always is Greg Eno of, well, he'll tell you where you can find his writing and all his information. Greg, how was your Thanksgiving?
Well, you know, Knee Jerks Tuesday, which means we're offering 50% off this podcast.
What's the promo code?
Right. I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. Thanks for that intro, Al. You can read me pretty much every week. Every Monday is when the new articles drop. The most recent one was about Dan Campbell and the Lions' dilemma with having a potentially winless.
Lots to say about Dan Campbell, I'm sure.
A winless season here, and we'll get into the Lions. We'll get into some Tiger stuff with Javier Baez and some college football stuff. And you can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. But before we get into what Al has planned for this evening, let's play a little game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, who win an aluminum Christmas tree. Remember those?
My grandmother had one. My grandma and grandpa. Yeah. Yes, they did. It was all silver, and then they had a light shining up at it that rotated to different colors. So it was very, very, very mid-'60s type of. Yes, and of course they used it well into the '70s. So
Lord knows how many family rooms those were in the days.
Exactly.
Not the living room, the family room.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the den. Or something.
In the den. I'm in the den right now. As a matter of fact. This person now made his name in two sports, actually, football and baseball. He was born in the state in 1962. Sadly, his career was cut short due to injury, so he was out of sports really by his early 30s. But he, like I say, was a two-sport athlete and hails from. He was actually born in Alabama, but went to a school. Also Southern school, but not Alabama, and that's the first school.
And he said football and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And he was out of the game by his early 30s. And when was his birthday? Oh, wait,
1962. 1962.
He was born so he's our age.
Yeah,
give or
basically.
take.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's younger than me. Oh my God. Yeah. Yep. Shoot. Because usually we're talking about dead people or something like that. So.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, two-sport athlete, obviously played in the 80s, more than likely.
Mm-hmm.
And, a two-sport guy. Oh, God. There's only a handful of two-sport guys that come up in the 80s, so I'll just throw Bo Jackson out there.
Bo Jackson's correct.
All
absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who else?
Bo knows.
Him and Deion Sanders, who's a little bit, he's a little too young. So yeah.
Yeah. Bo Jackson.
Bo knows.
Yep. Bo knows. Yep. That was the campaign. A hip injury in the 1990 playoffs, which cut short.
I was watching that game when it happened. You had no idea it was that severe of an injury at the time.
I know it didn't. Right, I remember that. It didn't look like it was that severe, but it ended his football career and really severely impacted his baseball career as well.
Yeah.
Bo was never. He was a power hitter, and that was about it. I mean, he could run, of course.
Yeah.
Average defensively, struck out a ton. But he was,
he probably would have fit in quite well in today's game with that all or nothing swing of his.
He was right, exactly. He was an exciting play. He was the kind of guy that you stopped what you were doing to watch his at bat.
Yep.
I remember the one time when he got really mad, he broke his bat over his knee. Remember that?
Yeah.
And he made that incredible. I think he climbed a wall one time to make a catch or something, or I don't know. But he was not a great defender, regardless.
Yeah.
Bo Jackson, 59 today, so happy birthday, Bo.
Oh, my God, we are getting old when Bo Jackson is pushing retirement age. So
I know. And you get the aluminum tree. Congratulations.
Boy, I'll have to replace my literal Charlie Brown tree I have. That's my Christmas tree, a literal Charlie Brown tree that was given to me by a family member. And it's literally about a foot and a half tall and looks just like with the cartoon. It's perfect. Because I can just sit on my coffee table and that's all I need. Now, if I want a big Christmas tree, that's Linda's got one. I don't need a big tree. So, but I can't wait, and I'll channel my inner grandpa. Sitting in a lazy boy. Putting a little snuff up his nose, watching the tree. So, like I said, that brings back memories. Talk about aluminum trees. So, but with that. I think it's time to start talking some baseball, Greg. What do you think? I mean, a lot of baseball news since we last talked. Like I said, I went to Florida, so but when we should have been recording when Eduardo Rodriguez got signed, so we got that to talk about. I didn't think did we have a chance to even talk about Taylor Barnhart as well? No,
Tucker Barnhart. No.
Yeah, Tucker Barnhart. For some reason I want to call him Taylor. And obviously the big news, which came down about 2 a.m. last night. I was getting ready to go to sleep, and bing on the phone, and there's the update from I think it was John Paul Morosi, saying Tigers have signed Javier Baez. Javier Baez is now a Tiger, one of the quote unquote elite shortstops. So we'll kind of talk about how elite he is. So that's the big one. So let's start with Baez, Greg. I think everybody wanted Carlos Correa. That's who I would have preferred. But considering the contracts that the Rangers decided to throw out there to the Simeon and the Sager, about $500 million combined, give or take. I think it was almost 6, really. That probably meant that Correa was going to get $10,350, $10,400 probably. And from all accounts, from what we have been told, or at least could insinuate from what Alavila and Illich Jr. had been telling us, Chris Illich, is that they were leery of spending that kind of jack on any ball player, no matter how good he is. And Carlos Correa is an elite shortstop at 20. He was only 27 years old. He's made All-Star games. He's won World Series. The guy is like a 6-WAR player. But the Tigers just didn't want to bite on that price tag. At least that's what we're guessing, Greg, because we don't know if he actually wanted to come here, regardless of the meeting everybody saw that AJ Hinch had with Correa. There's pictures taken of. But instead, they went cheaper. They targeted a 2-time All-Star, a literal boom or bust style player in the 28-year-old Javi Baez. Actually, he's going to turn 29 in a couple days. Baez was inked to a 6-year, $140 million deal. Features an opt-out after 2 years, a player opt-out, not a Tiger team option. Baez obviously has quite the resume, Greg. He won the World Series in 2016, was a big part of that World Series team. Finished second in the NL MVP voting. Say that real fast, that 3 times. In 2018, he is known as an elite defender. He's won a Gold Glove in 2020. He has 30 home run power. He's great on the base paths. He is an elite athlete. But he's undisciplined as hell at the plate, Greg. He's a free swinger. Led MLB with 184 strikeouts last year. Has a career on-base percentage of just .307. He has literally a despicable walk rate of 4.8%. And players like this don't tend to age well. As soon as they start to lose that athleticism, as soon as they start to lose a little bit of that bat speed, their decline isn't a slope, it's a cliff. So that's the scary part. The Tigers are gambling that they're going to get maybe 4 good years out of the career. Hell, if he gets 2, he's gone anyway. So, if he gives us 2 great years, he's gone. So, but despite the red flags, Greg, they went with Baez, and despite those red flags, despite the concerns about how well his game is going to age, about his free swinging ways, about he alienated a lot of fans in New York, with the thumbs down thing. But he is still, no matter what you say, he's a huge upgrade for the Tigers at shortstop. I mean, I think the Tigers were a -2 WAR at shortstop, 2.5 WAR last year at shortstop, and Baez is a 3 to 5 WAR player, depending essentially on his power. If he's hitting home runs, you got a 4 to 5 WAR shortstop, which is a big money player. If the power starts to drop, then the Tigers may have a problem on their hands. But where do you fall in this? Because this really feels like, Greg, a signing that is kind of really dividing the fan base. There's a lot of fans saying, yeah, he's an upgrade at shortstop. He hits a lot of home runs. I don't care if he strikes out a lot. And there's other players, other fans, I think, who are a little more analytically minded that said he doesn't get on base enough. And if he's not hitting home runs, he's not nearly as valuable. And athletic defenders tend to decline. So it's kind of a very, I guess it comes down to how long you think he's going to remain good. And that's always the risk with these long-term contracts, even though 6 years, I think, is about as short as you're going to get anymore with an elite, quote-unquote elite ball player on a contract these days. So where do you fall on all this?
I'm fine. 6 years, number one, I'm okay with that. I mean, he's going to be 29 tomorrow as we tape this. Yeah. So that'll take him through his age 35 year. That's not ancient by any means. Yeah. He has shown to be, I think, a little bit more durable, frankly, than Correa has been.
That is a good point to bring up. He is. He doesn't miss games.
It's funny when you think about, you look at something 6 and I think it's been reported 6 and 140, I think was the cost.
Yeah.
6 years, 140.
The 2 year
and that's actually crazy as it may seem. That's actually, not a bad price for a guy who, like you said, 2, all-star seasons. Actually, despite the little tiff he had with the Mets fans, actually played pretty well for the Mets after they acquired him.
Because he actually had a respectable on-base percentage for one thing. So
defensively, he more than holds his own. He won a Gold Glove in 2020. Mm-hmm. There's some people who just, I guess, can't be pleased no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. They complained about the Cabrera contract, although Miguel signed that past the age of 30. This one now, like I say, Baez will be 29 tomorrow, and so means, the Tigers are essentially kind of getting him in his prime. I know that I'm aware of the on-base thing and the strikeout thing. We were talking just before we went on the air about how that's kind of the way it is nowadays. I mean, he doesn't really stick out like a sore thumb in that regard. He's just kind of, that's just the way baseball is going. He kind of represents the game in that regard, and that boom and bust kind of a thing. But you could still have, if you work with him. The Tigers have some good coaches. You could cut down on the strikeout thing. I mean, you don't want to ruin the thing. That's the thing. You don't want to mess with him too much. I mean, he's obviously had a lot of success. On-base percentage be damned up to this point. Yeah. You don't want to try to maybe make him into something that he's not. But if you can cut down the strikeouts a little bit, all I know is that it was such a position of weakness last year. I mean, to the point it was almost comical. Yeah. The lack of production they got out of that position, both offensively and defensively, that I don't know what you want. I mean, you're getting a significant upgrade. You're not breaking the bank. You're not giving him 10 years. And Chris Ilitch is still making good on his promise that there would be assets for Al Avila to make these kinds of moves. And between Barnhart and Rodriguez and now Baez, as far as I'm concerned, Ilitch is putting his money where his mouth is. Yeah. And they may not be done. They're talking about maybe getting another starting pitcher, maybe getting another outfielder. We'll see. But all I know is a significant upgrade. And when you have Scope can go back to second base now because with the impending
I hope he goes back to second. He's a much more valuable player at second base. Yeah.
The impending arrival of Torkelson, right? Of Torkelson and first Spencer Torkelson. Then you've got your infield set. Yeah. Candelario, Baez, Scope, and eventually Torkelson.
Right. Yeah, it's. I guess I posted a little thing on Facebook today. It kind of tells you how I thought about it. I'm not mad, but I'm still mad, mainly because I know he's a huge upgrade. And he's a hell of an exciting ball player when he's on. I guess I really am leery of middle infielders who depend on their athleticism and they have bad history of quick and horrible declines. I guess that's my fear of him, and he is not the hitter that someone like Carlos Correa is, or for that matter Sager is, or Trevor Story for that matter. Even though Story's got the Coors Field thing to factor in with him, but I can see why the Tigers went in this way. And that I can understand the signing. I would have preferred Correa, but I can understand why they went with Baez. Essentially, a 6-year deal is much more preferable than a 10 or whoever knows how well it's taken to get Correa. Or for that matter, you saw the contracts that the Rangers put out were like that. It was 10-year type deals. And if Trevor's, I would have put it this way though, I would have loved to have seen Trevor Story, but from all accounts, his elbow could blow up at any second, and a shortstop with a bad elbow, what good is it? When it comes to that. So I can understand why they didn't go with Story, and the Rangers just went absolutely bonkers with what their contract offers. So in a lot of ways, I'm actually surprised Baez was this cheap. I think more than anything, I'm surprised. That's what surprised me. I could have thought, 6 at 140. I could have thought maybe, considering the market, because the market was pretty much down to. Story's really, really risky because of his elbow, so it really became down to Correa or Baez. You think I would have thought Baez could have gotten more, but I have a feeling we'll touch on this, that the upcoming labor Armageddon that's going to be in a couple days may have played into why. I said, I'm going to take the money while it's here. Things could change quickly with a new collective bargaining agreement. The money's there. It's a life-changing amount of money. I'm going to sign it. Maybe I could get another $20 million. But what's the big difference between 140 and 160 million, plus the 2-year opt-out? If he plays out of his mind, he's opting out of the contract. He's going to get another chance at a big-ass deal. So I can understand why. I can understand it. I just wish they could have got Correa. But it's, as you said, he's a really, really, if he's not a great player, he's very, very, very good, and at times great. And I guess the other thing you'd say about this, maybe you would have to think that A.J. Hinch signed off on this. And if Hinch is okay with this, if the Tigers coaching staff is okay with this, considering the relationship that A.J. Hinch had with Carlos Correa, I'm willing to trust the Tigers on this. I hate saying that I'm willing to trust the Tigers' brain trust, but I've bought in on A.J. Hinch big time. And if Hinch is fine with the negatives of Javier Baez or thinks the positives of him is going to completely overshadow those, I'm willing to roll with it. So he's a shortstop for at least the next 2 years. Would not surprise me if he's the shortstop for the next 6. And that's the other thing, too, that say Ryan Kreidler turns out to be a great shortstop. You move Baez a second, because Scope is only under contract for another, a couple years? I mean, you move Baez a second, and you move Kreidler into short. I mean, that's a possibility, or vice versa. At least this gives the Tigers options as well, because Baez is also, if you can play shortstop, you can play any player in the infield. So, I'm torn just because I'm huge onto on-base percentage. That is my biggest pet peeve with the Tigers over the past few years, is that they have no one that takes a damn walk. And analytically minded teams, that's a big, big deal. You need to get the on-base percentage up. So this is kind of going against, at least a little bit, what the Tigers analytics team would think would want in a ball player. But I guess, as you say, the power and the defense and the fact that, they were so desperate to plug that hole at shortstop, they decided to sign off on it.
It's interesting what you were saying about scope and the opt out with Baez, and all of a sudden now the Tigers go from the coming out of a rebuild into a sense of urgency.
Yeah,
I mean, you with Correa, yeah. With Baez being able to opt out, it's been reported after year 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what happens? That'll be after the 2023 season. Does that mean now that the window, all of a sudden, even though you've got Torkelson and Green who haven't even played in the big leagues yet, and you've got the young pitchers who are just finding their sea legs as big leaguers, and Rodriguez and so forth, it's like all of a sudden now there's this, which is good. I'm not complaining. It's good to have a sense of urgency now to continue to build on. And AJ Hinch has always said, look, the 77 wins, that's okay, considering that nobody really thought we could do that. But that's not the end game here. The end game is to win a championship. We want winners. We want guys who've been there and done that. And this is nowhere near. This job is nowhere near finished. Just because we maybe kind of surprise people a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's still, now you've got some established guys who've done it, of course. But now I'm not looking so much now, Al, at the Baez's and the Barnharts and the Rodriguez's. I'm looking more at the Badus and the even Candelario and of course the young pitchers. Can they continue to continue their trajectory in the right direction? We're kind of seeing that with the Pistons right now. Some of their young players, are kind of, I wouldn't say stagnant, but they haven't taken that step, at least so far, the first 20 games of the season. Guys like Bay and Hayes is still a work in progress, and Cade's having his, he's still finding his way. And, they haven't, some of these young guys really still haven't, even Grant has not been as good as he was last year. So and I think it's kind of what you were saying before about rebuilds, and Rod Beard said this, one of the beat writers. He said, look, like what you've said in the past is that rebuilds are not linear. You think that guys are going to go on this upward, 45-degree angle all the way up to the top, and it just doesn't always work that way. There could be some bumps in the road. Doesn't mean they're not going to be good players. But I'm looking at guys like Badu and so forth. Those kind of players, I want to see them do it again. I want to see them improve. Badu's only 21 for God's sakes, or 22, whatever he is. I want to see Candelario have another good year, 2 years in a row. I want to see the pitchers continue to develop. There's a lot of young guys that are still key to this whole thing. Can't always be on the established guys that come in, and it's got to be these young. The young guys have got to hit. I mean, they got to hit on the young guys, is what I'm trying to say. And they've got a really good, I think, a really nice nucleus if these kids develop and become the core of a Houston Astros type core, where you see them kind of be together for 4, 5, 6 years and make a lot of trips to the postseason. May not always win the World Series, of course, but make a lot of, kind of like the Tigers did from 2006 to 2012, make a lot of trips to the postseason, 2013, make a lot of trips to the postseason, kind of keep the bulk of the guys together, make some runs. That's what you want to see. I think that's going to be incumbent, though, on these younger guys. This is not going to work if the younger guys don't do what they're expected to do. And that's can be a big if. I know that Riley Green looked great last year. Torkelson had his moments. The young pitchers each had their moments, but they also stumbled too, frankly, at times, with what you would expect. But they've got a really bright young pitching coach, so I'm not worried about that. Some of the hitters, I think, were okay because of maybe Coolbaugh and Hessman, the hitting coaches. So maybe, there's a lot to work with, Al, but it's not going to be it can't be successful unless these younger players prove that the 2021 wasn't an aberration, that is just the beginning, scratching the surface of what they can be.
Yeah, and let's not play service time games with like Torkelson and Green and things like that.
Yeah.
As you said, especially if this 2-year window before the opt-outs kicking in and some of these contracts in. And also there is still, now, I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but there's a lot of people saying that Hinch has an opt-out as well. So, yeah, there's a bit of urgency here for the Tigers to actually contend. I don't know if I don't think they're better than the White Sox yet, because there's still a lot of unproven young talent. But this is a team that should, at the very least, be a 500 team. And if you're hovering around 500, you're hovering around the wild card race, and if you're in the wild card race, anything can happen. So yeah, the 2-year thing is definitely, as you put it, there is definitely a sense of urgency here now, because AJ Hinch didn't sign up to run a rebuilding team. He signed up to run a contending team, and at least now the Tigers are starting to act like contenders. And that leads us to the left-handed starting pitcher they signed, Greg, Eduardo Rodriguez. Erod turned down the Red Sox qualifying offer of 1 year, $18.4 million, which means since the Tigers signed him, they will lose their third highest draft pick, which I think is a competitive balanced pick after the second round. But the Tigers immediately snapped him up. I think he was actually the first big offseason signing in free agency. Tigers snapped him up with 5 years, $77 million deal. Again, this is another one, a player option after 2 years. Player can opt out. So this seems to be more analytics-driven than the Baez deal. Because Rodriguez did not have the prettiest of stats, per se, if you go by ERA. His ERA, I believe, was, bring up the stats, 4.74, which, in a whip of 1.389. And he also missed all of 2020 due to COVID-caused myocarditis, which is a swelling of the heart. So he had a very rough COVID episode, but he came out and became a very important part of a Red Sox rotation that made the playoffs. But the things, if you don't look at ERA, if you look at the 3.32 fielding independent pitching FIP, which is essentially walks, strikeouts, and hits, his 3.32 is very, very solid. And it's known throughout baseball that Boston had a crappy-ass defense, which means he had a batting average on balls in play of 364, which essentially is very, very high and is extremely unsustainable, because a more normal batting average on balls in play is closer to 300, not 364. So he was very, very, very unlucky with a very bad defense behind him. The Tigers improved their defense with an elite shortstop, and if they have scope at second base, they're better at second base, and Candelario's a decent third baseman. All of a sudden, he's got a decent defense behind him. I can see why the Tigers decided to snap him up, because Eduardo Rodriguez, as things stand right now, as I gotta remember, see, how old is he? Let me bring up the stats again. Rodriguez is only 28. He's going to turn 29 at the beginning of the season. He is one of those kind of pitchers they need. He's not a star, but he'll give you 170 to 200 innings, and be essentially a rock solid number 3 guy, I think. Excuse me. I would call it, maybe like a Dan Petrie sort of pitcher, or a better Milt Wilcox, maybe. A kind of guy that you have to, he's not a star, but he goes out there every 5 days, will give you 6-7 innings and keep you in games and win more than his fair share, because he's a legitimate rotation guy on a good team. So I had no problem with all of this signing. I think this is a much more they're hoping that this is kind of a buy low contract when it comes to Rodriguez, because the analytics show he should have even better stats than he put up on a playoff team. Right, and he's going to get out of Fenway Park and move into Comerica Park, which that's in and of itself should help him. Yeah, you can get a pop fly down the lines at Fenway. It's a home run. So well, getting back to what you were saying about the
the comparison you made to Wilcox and the going out every 5 days and giving you 6-7 innings, and those kinds of things, Al, are, especially for a guy like Hinch. I mean, really for any manager, not just Hinch, but when you've got 3 young guys in your rotation, Manning, Skubal, and Mize. Okay, you're going to start the season, barring injury, of course. You're going to start the season with 3 kids in your rotation. Okay, so they may not be as strict of an innings watch as they were in 2021, but neither of them are going to pitch 200 innings. I mean, nobody's going to pitch 200 innings among those 3 guys. So it's important to have a guy like a veteran guy in the rotation who can kind of settle things down, who like you said, is going to go out there and probably eat up some innings, get you to the 6th or 7th inning if you need to, and just be that veteran presence. Been there, done there kind of a guy. He's got postseason experience. He's pitched, in Boston where the pressure is high. He's looking forward to another chapter of his career, but don't underestimate undervalue, I should say, what that brings to the table. When you've got 3 youngsters in the rotation who, themselves may each pitch 150 to 160, 170 each. It's nice to have a guy like Rodriguez who can touch 200 innings and just, maybe give the bullpen a little bit of a blow. It would be nice to have even one more. A veteran starter. I know that, because Turnbull is going to be out of commission because of Tommy John, so you can't count on him. So it would be nice if they could get one more, bargain basement guy, another innings eater. But this is, he's left-handed. There's a lot to like about this. The price tag was appropriate. There was nothing wrong. I think it was 5 and 77 or something, so like 15 million a year.
With and the 2-year opt-out. More that urgency again. Right.
And that's, but by the way, fans will get all the, don't get bent out of shape. The fans shouldn't get bent out of shape with these opt-outs. That's just the new normal now. These opt-outs aren't unique to the Tigers. Okay, these opt-outs are all over. It's just the way it is now. Players want opt-outs. It's a way for them to kind of have their cake and eat it too. I'm going to sign this contract, and if things don't go the way I like them to, for whatever reason, the team doesn't go the way they want it to, or they're not happy with the manager or the city or whatever, they have that. And granted, the opt-outs are still only reserved for the elite players. Don't get me wrong. It's not everybody who signs a contract is an opt-out. But it's not something that is like unique to Detroit. I mean, this is not an anti-Detroit thing. But what it does do, frankly, I think I'm okay with these things because I think that when guys kind of are on the clock like that, I know maybe you can look at it as well. There's no real commitment. Baez is not really committing to the Tigers because he can leave in 2 years. Just because a guy has an opt-out, of course, doesn't mean he's going to take it. Now, he could. Sure, of course. But it also puts pressure on the team that's doing the signing. Okay, we've got these guys together now for a couple of years. We know for sure. But after that, who knows? So, there's some, and you still have young guys who are firmly under team control. The 3 pitchers I talked about, Torkelson, Green, other guys that are coming up through the system that are still firmly under team control. So it's not like everybody's leaving in 2 years. But that's, it's all about now. I mean, baseball right now, the Tigers are in a situation, Al, where it's about it is about the next 2 years anyway, frankly. So why, if you're going to give a guy an opportunity to leave in 2 years, okay, it's about the next 2 years anyway. You mentioned Hinch, not coming here, even though he's a young guy, still a young guy, really. Yeah. He's not coming here to monkey around with 75 wins every year. He wants to get back to the World Series. And he wants, players that he can do that with. If he can be touching 500 with the team he had last year, I can't imagine what he can do with even if spring training started tomorrow and they made no more moves. I think already they have a chance to be above 500 with what they've done.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that the year before his myocarditis episode, in 2019, he actually finished 6th in the Cy Young. If you look at traditional stats, he was 19-9 with a 3.8 ERA, led the league in starts with 34. had over 200 innings pitched, and his actual analytical peripherals were also very, very solid. So this is a talented pitcher who was playing in a high-stress environment in Boston in a bandbox of a ballpark. So There's a lot to like about the signing, and even if it's not a value signing, you don't feel like they overpaid. At the very worst, this is a market value signing, in which you can't ask for more than that when you're signing the guy in free agency. I have to give the Tigers all the credit in the world for they saw the pitcher they wanted, and they went immediately out and signed him before the market could play itself out, and he probably could have got more money. So I have no complaints there either. So there's more than likely 4 guys in rotation. I do agree with you. They need another pitcher. If they take some of the money that they're saving on Baez and put it towards a pitcher, or if they go back to the 1 year make good deals like they got Willie Peralta last year, I don't know which direction they're going to go. But at this point, it looks like they're going to ride out the CBA lockout, the contract lockout, labor lockout, I should say. And who knows when they'll actually make a move on a pitcher. Maybe close to spring training if we even have baseball. That's yet to be determined. We'll talk a little bit about that. All right, Tucker Barnhart. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick. One of the guys who won't be that veteran pitcher in the rotation is Matthew Boyd, of course.
Oh yeah, bring that up as well. Yeah, he was non-tendered. So I don't have a problem with that either. One, he was going to miss half the year anyway because he had surgery, and 2. He is what he is at this point. Yeah, I think if he was his last year of arbitration, he was likely going to make $7 million or more, and he's essentially a guy who gives you a 5 ERA. Even though he had a pretty decent year last year. Again, we've seen how many times have we seen that with Boyd, where he looks like a world beater for 2-3 months, and then the wheels fall off. Instead of the wheels falling off last year, he got hurt, and that was that. So. Yeah, so that's another reason why the Tigers really do need to look for more arms. They do need, and actually they probably could use another guy in the bullpen as well. So they should not be done, and I hope they aren't. All right, catcher, because that was a bit of a sore spot because they looked like they were set with Jake Rogers and Eric Haas, but Haas, he's a backup. I think he got exposed somewhat because he played so much last year that his numbers really started to tail off at the end. Yeah, he put up ridiculous power numbers, but at best he's a below average defensive catcher, and he is best used in a platoon or put him in the outfield occasionally. He's a matchup guy. He's not a guy you want to play every day. And obviously if Rogers needing Tommy John, he's done for the year, which is awful because he was really looking like he was going to finally live up to what we've been told for the last 4 years, he was the future at the catcher. So now who knows what happens after Tommy John. So the Tigers went out again right at the end, as soon as they could. They saw this is the catcher we want. The Reds are making a salary dump. This is exactly what it was. They traded for catcher Tucker Barnhart. They sent in exchange for Barnhart. He's 30 years old. He's won 2 Gold Gloves. They sent essentially a fringe infield prospect, 24-year-old Nick Quintana. I don't even think he's played above Double-A. And at 24, calling him a prospect is a bit of a stretch at this point. So as soon as they traded for him, the Tigers immediately picked up his team option of $7.5 million for the next coming year. Barnhart's a career 240. He slashed essentially 248, 324, 371, which is decent for a catcher. It's not world beating, but you're not signing Tucker Barnhart to. You're not getting Mike Piazza back there when it comes to the bat, but you are getting a top-tier defensive catcher who is known for solid pitch framing, is known for handling pitchers very, very well, and then obviously being an all-around good backstop, which the Tigers desperately needed. This buys them a year, and hopefully Jake Rogers is able to come back from his Tommy John. So this is one of those where I got to give the Tigers credit again for signing, essentially targeting the guy they wanted and immediately going out and getting him. And it said volumes that the Reds fan base was actually sad to see him go because he's been, a career Red who's played pretty darn well for them. Well,
I mean, the days that you mentioned, we're talking guys like Piazza and Johnny Bench and Carlton Fisk and Pudge
or even
Rodriguez.
Lance Parrish types, So those
kinds
days
of
are gone. Yeah.
Those kinds of players, exactly. Those kinds of players are gone.
If you can hit like that, you don't put them at catcher anymore because catching shortens careers. It really does.
Sorry, those kinds of players are gone. Well, I shouldn't say they're gone, but I mean, those kinds of that's not what the catching position is anymore. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
They're guys who are going to hit 25, 30 home runs a year at the catcher position. It's just not. It's just not the way it is anymore. It's right now. It's all about defense. It's about, like you said, pitch framing. If you get a little pop, Rogers was a good example. Jake Rogers was lauded as being throughout his time in the minor leagues, he was going to be the defensive guy.
Yep.
It was never about his bat. Now, the false starts that he had as a big leaguer were because his bat was so bad. I mean, you got to hit a little bit, of course, to be in the big leagues. But he was never heralded. Rogers was as an offensive dynamo anyway.
Right.
And when he finally did find his way, he was every bit as advertised defensively. He was throwing guys out. He was handling the pitchers well. He was, and which is another thing too that doesn't get that back in the day wasn't, I don't think is appreciated as much as how you handle a pitching staff and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stats, when Rogers was behind the plate, the Tigers pitchers were significantly better than when
Rogers was really, really starting to hit his groove when it comes to that kind of stuff. Everything you wanted, a good solid. And the Tigers have had so many. So much difficulty finding a really good everyday catcher.
Yeah, anyway. And I will not stand for Alex Avila slander because this fan base treated him like shit, and he was actually a very good catcher.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. And it really his biggest transgression was being the son of the GM.
Yeah, I never saw a guy get hit by so many wicked balls either.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he took some abuse back there.
Yeah, but so Barnhart is, by all indications, of an excellent defensive catcher.
Yep.
I know I know fans don't pay money to go to the ballpark to see a defensive catcher. I get it, but that's so important nowadays. Yep. There's so many runs that can be saved when you have a guy like that. And if you flipping it around, if you have a guy that other teams just run wild on, for example. I mean, all of a sudden, guys are in scoring position more often than they should be, and it's just, so Barnhart is the modern day catcher. Yeah. Johnny Bench is dead, not literally.
He is.
So it's just that's just he's what catching is nowadays.
Yeah, it's this is again, this is a great, especially for a team with so many young pitchers. You need someone like this behind the plate that can, quote unquote, handle pitchers, and that's, as you said, that's exactly what catching is today. If you can hit, you're not going to play catcher because they want you playing every day and not getting hurt. So yeah, I wouldn't, so far so good in this offseason. It's just a shame, Greg, that the offseason is going to come to a screeching halt in about a day. On the 1st, well, actually, 11:59 p.m. tomorrow, about 28 hours from now, as we're recording. The owners will lock out the players as the CBA, I believe, comes to an end. So negotiations are underway. I believe I saw an article from Bob Nightingale of the USA Today, and he's well known as a mouthpiece for the owners. And word was that they met today, and the meeting only lasted 30 minutes. Owners walked away from the table, and that's where we stand right now. Nothing has been agreed on. We're going to see it, at the very least, possible labor Armageddon, Greg. I don't think either one of these parties would be stupid enough to let this bleed into the regular season. But it's still a damn shame because people are really fired up about baseball right now in the off season. Players getting signed and the hot stove is really, really hot right now, and that's good for baseball. And all of a sudden, Greg, it's going to come to a immediate stop in about a day because I always blame the owners, because the owners have too much, are just so goddamn greedy, and they refuse to open the books despite claiming themselves poor and also being the recipients of massive amounts of corporate welfare, be it on tax breaks and things like that. So I'm always on the side of the players, but I would hope there's some sort of compromise to be found much sooner than later, because this cannot bleed into the training camp. It just can't. It cannot bleed into spring training.
Well, there's conflicting viewpoints on this. I've seen some really doom and gloom.
Yes, the labor Armageddon.
Outlooks.
Yes.
Right. I've seen that. We're not going to have baseball till the All-Star break, if we have it at all, and we may not even have it into deep into 2023. All this, sky is falling.
That's definitely Chicken Little sounding, yeah, definitely.
Right, and then I've also seen people say, it looks bad right now.
This is bargaining, but this is just bargaining. Yeah, this is how it goes. Yeah.
The players have, I think. Now, I don't know what this means for the current negotiations, but the players have kind of come out on the short end of the stick, I think, in the last couple of CBAs. I mean, I know it sounds crazy because the salaries are still through the roof, but overall, the whole body of work has been kind of, I think, tilted toward the owners in the last couple of CBAs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
What that means, I don't know in terms of for this negotiation, but so I tend to land more on the optimistic side, maybe because either I'm naive or I just don't want to believe that there can be, like you said, labor Armageddon. I just think the stakes are too high for both sides to monkey around with that notion. Now, having said that, it's not like there hasn't been precedent. I mean, there's been precedent.
Oh, yeah.
We lost the World Series in 1994. Baseball's had umpteen labor stoppages throughout this. We lost a good portion of the 1981 season. No World Series in '94. There's been trouble. It's not like there's no precedent for this. Mm-hmm. But you just like to think that. And I know that, again, this could be my naivety, but that sooner or later, the both sides will take into consideration the really big picture and how this affects the game and how the fans, which I know people are going to think I'm nuts for even thinking the fans even come into the play here. Mm-hmm. But what this will do, what a significant labor stoppage or lockout in this case would do to future revenue, future interest in the game. You already see American kids, not playing the game as much as they. I mean, this is my eye test. I don't see kids playing baseball at the local sandlots as much as they did when I was a kid.
Oh God, I'd live to play baseball as a kid.
A lot more Latin American players and Japanese players are coming into the big leagues. And I'm not against that. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it just showed the percentage of, kind of like in hockey, where it was like 95% Canadian players, and now that's obviously changed.
Right.
The percentage of players in the big leagues who were American versus any other nationality was deep into the 90s.
Yep.
Now, with influx of Latin American players and Japanese players and you name it, it's so. I'm worried, Al, about what a lengthy stoppage could do to the game, and I'm just hoping that both sides would. I know that I understand why they both want to dig their heels in and stick up for the respective sides, but they also have a common friend here, which is the game itself, and that is what drives both of their incomes. Is the game. It makes the owners money and it makes the players money, and it's the goose that laid the golden egg kind of thing. And I just don't want them to. I want them to understand that while you want to stick up for what you think is right and everything, that let's not forget what this could do to the game down the pike. There's still some people, and I'm not sure what the percentage is, but there's still some people I've talked to them who said, I don't pay attention to baseball since '94, which was that year they lost half the season and lost the World Series.
Yep.
They lost after '94. Well, I've also heard people say, well, they've lost me after subsequent labor outages. Now, how much of that is really talk and how much of it is true, I don't know. But I do know that baseball, with all of its other issues, with people worried about the lengths of the games and the rules changes and try to pace of play and all these different things going on with robot umpires, and there's a lot of change happening to the game that isn't going to be well received by everybody. But one thing that everybody can agree on, they definitely don't want to see. Whether you like the idea of a robotic umpire calling balls and strikes or not, one thing I think even those folks can agree on is they don't want to see a labor stoppage, and they don't want to see and it can't come at a worse time for the Tigers, because they're finally coming out of this hibernation and ready to make some noise again. And now it would be a shame if that all gets put on hold because they've got to go through a big, long, extended labor dispute.
Yeah, this is the most I remember this fan base talking about the Tigers in years over the past few weeks with all the moves they've made, and even if the fan base isn't entirely in agreement on Baez, at least they're talking about it, and having discussions about it, and want the Tigers to improve and do well, and they're excited for the season. And all of a sudden, it's going to come to a crashing halt in a little more than 24 hours. Yeah, and there's a lot wrong with the game, between, as you brought up, the diversity issues, and we don't know how the financials are going to look in the future because of cord cutting, because the TV money, sooner or later, that's going to come to a head. The Bally Sports networks are losing money hand over fist, and Sinclair has actually lost, I think, about $5 billion in worth on the regional sports network since they bought them from Fox. So there's a lot of financial issues here, but fans don't care about that. Fans are concerned about, are they going to be on the field on opening day? Are we going to be able to talk about baseball in February when pitchers and catchers report? That's always a big day. So, they need to get this stuff sorted out. And I know it's billionaires arguing with millionaires and all that kind of stuff, but there is so much money still available here for everybody involved. There should not be too much trouble finding a compromise position that everybody can find acceptable, except the owners, for the most part, Greg, eat the damn rich. They're all billionaires who get whatever they want all the damn time. And they're getting pushback from the players because they say what you will about I agree with you. I think the players' last couple of contracts have been heavily in favor of the owners. I think they want to change this. Even with that, baseball still has by far the strongest. It's probably if not the strongest labor union in the entire world. It's up there. I mean, this is a strong, strong union. A lot of people are making a lot of money because of that union, and they will stick together. But yeah, they need to make things a little more equitable for the players as well. It's awful top heavy. They need to get rid of the rules that allow owners to do the service time game. I hate that. I do not want to see Torkelson and Green, if they are ready to play, I don't want to see them in Toledo till June, because that buys them another year before free agency. They need to get those rules fixed where, players need to be able to hit free agency sooner. They need to fix the arbitration rules. A lot of this stuff can be fixed with this bargaining agreement if they could just sit down and get it knocked out. It's just, I do not trust the owners as far as I could throw them, and I think the players feel the same way, much because they kind of got raked over the coals last couple of times around. And this time they do have a Marvin Miller type at the negotiating table. If you have a lawyer that's pissing off the owners, then you have the right lawyer, and I think that's what the players have right now. So I hope this all works out. I hope both sides realize this cannot go more than a month or two. Starts going past that, and it starts affecting spring training. Shit's going to hit the fan bases, and they are going to lose even more fans. And I'd hate to see it, because baseball, as many issues as it has, Greg, the games are starting to take too long, and we've talked about the issues. I still love baseball. It's the game I played first. It's the game I played last till my body gave out. It's such a great great sport. I hate to see it drugged through the mud over labor negotiations. I really do. Even though I am on the side of the players.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Texas Rangers. They lost 100 games last year, and they just, within 24, 48 hours, just committed like $500 million.
Yep,
to the middle of their infield.
2 players for 10 years each. That's crazy.
So it's hard. It's going to be hard to.
You can't cry poor when you're dropping that kind of coin.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. All right. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about but next time we talk, Greg, there will be a lockout. So hopefully we'll at least have some good news when it comes to negotiations, because this might be our last serious baseball discussion that involves actual players for who knows how long. So we may be talking about the menu. We may be talking about revenue splits and service time and arbitration instead of who's going to play shortstop, and I hate that. But that's the way things are headed for the next few months, I think. All right. Shall we talk Detroit Lions? Do we have to? Should we?
I'm afraid we do. Yeah, I'm afraid we do.
You're twisting my arm, I see. Okay. All right. Well, as we speak, the Lions are 0-10-1. Thank God I was in Florida, so I saw very little of the Pittsburgh game. I got to see of the tie in Pittsburgh. I got to see what everybody else in the damn country saw, and that was the overtime. Because I had spent the afternoon at the pool. I got back home just in time, got back to my dad's place just in time to watch that overtime, and it was as bad as everybody said. And obviously I got to watch Thanksgiving Day, and that was an absolute debacle, Greg. Turkey Day was awful. They lost on another last-second field goal. Was it the 16-14 final to the Bears? And that final drive was such a cluster. The Bears got the ball with 8:30 left to play, and they never gave the ball up. They were literally taking knees near the goal on the 4-yard line just to run out the clock so they could kick a chip shot field goal, which would made for the third walk-off loss for the Lions this year. There was so many questionable coaching decisions in that game made by Dan Campbell, and that final drive, just watching the Lions coaching staff panic. It looked like they were in a sheer panic with some of their decision making, and still not getting plays right out of timeouts. If that doesn't give you major concerns over Dan Campbell as a head coach, I don't know what will, because that was an embarrassing display of football on Thanksgiving, and specifically an embarrassing display, Greg, from the coaches in the play calling. You're at midfield. It's 3rd and 32 because of 3 straight penalties. But you only need, 15 yards maybe to at least get a shot at a field goal? And you call a draw play from midfield? I mean, I can understand doing that if you're on your own 20 or something like that. But doing it at midfield, that is a fireable offense if you ask me. And then what we saw go down on that final drive, especially when he got to the goal line, and you had the defensive coordinator trying to call a timeout, and Campbell calling a timeout, and you cannot call back-to-back timeouts. It was... Oh my! And then you had the defensive formation coming out of all that mess, where it was 3rd and 4, and the last thing you can do then in that position, Greg, is give up a first down, because at that point the Bears can do what they will with the clock and run it all the way down. And the Lions come out, and the defensive backs have 8-yard cushions on the receivers. Wideout runs 5 yards, turns around, bop, catches the pass, falls down, first down, and literally the Bears kneel on the ball till they kick the field goal. That was the absolute worst thing they could do. You give up a touchdown there, you're better off letting them a touchdown. At least you get the ball back and you're down 6. You have a chance. The way this all ended up falling, the way this all the dominoes fell, Greg, it was one of the worst coaching displays I've ever seen from a Lions coach. And we've seen some really bad displays of coaching from this team.
Well, the gist of my column yesterday was that the Lions are likely going to be faced with the prospects of their brand new coach, to whom they've given reportedly 6 years.
Yes.
They're going to face the prospect now of year one under Dan Campbell. If you could not have, even as the most cynical Lions fan, you could not have come up with this scenario. This is the absolute worst case scenario. You give a guy 6 years, which in and of itself is nuts, and then he turns in what is going to be, let's face it, barring some miracle, a winless season.
Yep.
He's going to author a winless season in the first of your 6 years. Now, I don't want to hear about it's a rebuild and we're going. Yeah. What the Lions are going to do, and this is what they're going to do, and this is what I wrote about Monday. They're going to ride it out with. I can guarantee you, despite 0-16-1, the Lions will, with a straight face, bring Campbell back.
Yep.
They'll say publicly that they stand behind him. They'll point to injuries. They'll point to this. They'll point to that. They'll
say there will be a scapegoat, probably Anthony Lynn, the offensive coordinator.
Could be.
Yeah.
And Lynn probably is kicking himself for taking the job, by the way.
Exactly.
But they would probably they're going to say, well, we were in all these games and we were so close and a few things go our way and it would look different. Well, first of all, the reason you lost those close games largely is because of your coach, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, so what? I mean, the NFL, games are won and lost, Al. You know this. So many games in the league ride on a play here and a play there.
Yep.
4 points here, 3 points there, a late field goal, a late touchdown, you name it. I mean, the league, that's the league every single week. Every team, literally all 32 teams could say, well, even the teams that were 10-6 could say, well, we could have been 13-3. If a couple of things had gone this, that's the league. Dennis Green said it best. We are, or maybe it wasn't Green. Whoever said we are what we are. You are what your record says.
Yeah, that was at Bill Parcells. You are what your record says you are. Yeah.
Right. And that's the way I don't care if you were in the game till the very end. I don't care if you lost by 3. I don't care if you want to take and say, well, we lost 7 games by a total of 17 points. I don't care. Yeah. It's about winning. And the head coach in this case has literally prevented the Lions from winning. You mentioned those 3 walk-off losses. I could argue 2 of those were directly Dan Campbell's fault. Maybe not the one in Minnesota. I might give the one in Minnesota, maybe not that one. But the one at home against Baltimore and the one at home against the Bears were directly because of Dan Campbell's malfeasance as coach. The thing that's disturbing about this, Al, is, and I said this on Twitter, Campbell went into this season with no expectations, none.
Yep.
Everybody in the NFL knew that the Lions were rebuilding and they weren't going to be any good, and he took 0 expectations and has not lived up to even those.
Yeah.
He's and the other thing too is that he's not learning.
Yeah.
We're 11 weeks into this now, and I'm not seeing any growth from him in terms of how he handles the clock, the decisions he makes. He goes for it on 4th down when he shouldn't. He punts when he should go for it. He kicks field goals when he should. He doesn't kick field goals when he should. He's always doing the opposite thing, and I know. And it's not like he's not ever coached as a head coach. He did 9 games in Miami, as an interim,
right?
Several years ago. But he just seems like I don't think he's snake. I don't want to hear that he's snake bitten either. I think he's just making bad decisions. He took the play calling away from Lynn, which, Anthony Lynn said all the right things. He said, look, if I was the head coach, I'd do the same thing, and I don't blame him and whatever. Okay, I don't look at it as a demotion, even though it is. I don't look at it that way. Well, now here's the other thing he's done now, Campbell. First of all, that's totally backfired. That has done absolutely nothing. I mean, if he was going to take the play calling thing away from Glenn. I could live with it, even if the Lions lost all those games, if he showed some sort of there was some significant difference in the play calling.
Learning from the experience or something, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And the play calling has been absolutely atrocious.
Yes.
You mentioned the 3rd and 32 scenario.
Yep.
In the game in Pittsburgh the week before, or not the week before, that was a couple weeks before, the game in Pittsburgh, that overtime debacle, where Campbell, when was it against the Browns? It was against the Browns. It was against the Browns. Where he punted.
Yeah.
Instead of going for it, gave the ball back to the Browns, who promptly ran out the clock with Chubb, of course.
Yeah.
You got an all-world running back in Chubb, and everybody
the quote-unquote cowardly punt. And
everybody in the building, the Steelers game was another debacle. But the Steelers were not any good either in that game. But the Browns have this all-world running back, Chubb, who the Lions had not been able to stop all day anyway.
Right.
It wasn't like they had done a great job on him all day. Everybody in the building knows that when the Browns get the ball back, they're going to – Mayfield's not any good either, by the way. So they're just going to give the ball to Chubb. Okay, as any NFL team would, of course. Just keep handing the ball. You and I could have been the quarterback in that series of downs. Just give the ball to Chubb, and that's exactly what they did, and he ran the clock out. Because the Lions were – as usual, when the defense really needed a stop, they couldn't get it. That how many times have we seen that?
Right.
It's absolutely embarrassing to give the ball up with 8.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and never see it again. That's I don't care what level of football you're playing, high school, Pee Wee, Pop Warner, I don't care. If you can't get the ball back in 8.5 minutes, that's absolutely disgusting. So Campbell is, to me, Al, he's not learning. I'm not seeing any growth. I'm not seeing any maturation. Mm-hmm. I know it's 11 games, but still, 11 games is a decent amount of games to try to see some sort of I'm learning from my mistake thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I know he's got a quarterback. I know he's hamstrung by the quarterback. Quarterback's not great. I get it. But my goodness gracious, I wrote in my column. I'm afraid if the Lions fans see another draw play on 3rd and long, they're going to lose their minds. They're going to burn the field down. I mean, this is I don't know. So, but my original point, Al, was that the Lions now have this PR nightmare. Mark my words, they're going to have a PR nightmare in exactly 6 weeks when they finish this season 0-16-1.
Yep.
They're going to try. You cannot. I'm sorry. You cannot bring a guy. I don't care how many. I don't care if it's a 20-year contract. You can't bring a guy back when it's first you didn't win a game.
Yep.
I mean, you can't do it. But here's the thing. They're going to do it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They're going to bring him back because that's what the Lions do. They never cut bait early. They never admit a mistake. They never, play cutthroat in a business that demands that you play cutthroat. He's a nice guy. Look at the injuries. Look, we were so close.
Yeah.
He's players never quit on him. Oh, he's a player's coach. They'll say all these flowery things, but the bottom line is the guy went 17 weeks, not 16 like Marinelli, 17 weeks without a win. I don't care about the tie. 17 weeks without a victory, and several of those games he lost. He lost for them. The coach did.
Yeah.
But they're going to do it. They're going to. This is another Lions thing, and they're going to bring him back, and it's ridiculous. It really is.
Yeah, it's. How many guys have been in this position? Yeah, ask Browns fans if it made sense for them to bring Hugh Jackson back after they had a winless season. He was fired the next year. So it's hard to see this working out at this point. And it's hard to believe. You predicted 3 wins. I thought they would stumble to 4 or 5, because it's the NFL. As you said, Christ, I think the Jets have 3 wins for Christ's sake. But in the end, and when you bring up, when you have fans say, but they lost on the last play, they were close in these games, they were in the game. You nailed it. That's the NFL. They're saying, they only lost by 1 possession. I bet you 80 to 90% of the games are 1-score games for the most part. That's just how the NFL is. But, this
Right.
is the old, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
Right.
That's just how this comes off as. And I think you called it here. The Lions Brain Trust, is going to ride out this season and play, as you said, we played close, and the players never quit, and Dan Campbell's a motivator, and they'll bring him back next year, and then things will really come to a head, and they'll have to fire him anyway. So, yeah, if other franchises have shown, Greg, if you realize you have the wrong guy, you get rid of him. You move on ASAP. You don't go with the sunk cost fallacy, which this would be. No, if the Lions stumble out at the end of the season, go out winless, and say, well, we're going to bring Campbell back anyway because he's still got 5 more years on his contract. That is the sunk cost fallacy.
You know what, Al? What? You're right. What is the bigger embarrassment here?
Yeah.
Would it be more embarrassing to fire a guy after one season of a 6-year contract? Okay, forget the finances. Would that be more embarrassing or more of a stain on the organization? Or would it be more embarrassing and more of a stain on the organization if you bring a guy back who didn't win a game?
Yeah.
The only other guy that was brought back after he didn't win a game was John McKay, but that was an expansion team.
Yeah, that was a hugely different thing. And McKay had a track record.
You could right. You can understand that one. I'm not okay, but sometimes you said it perfectly. You make up. Sometimes you don't get the right guy. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that happens all the time, and not just in football.
Yep, happens in business. Yes, in life. Right.
In life, you hire a guy. Obviously, you hired the reason you hired him because you thought he was the right guy. I can understand that. But when it becomes apparent that he's not, now they're going to say that the people who are going to defend Campbell, which I don't know who that's going to be, but the people who are going to defend him are going to say, "Well, look at the roster." And, that's not the point.
Yep.
Everybody knew the roster was bad.
Yep.
I said 3 wins. You said 5. We've been over that a million times.
Right.
Well, okay. 3. They're still not going to get 3 either.
Yep.
I mean, the roster. I predicted 3 wins because I knew the roster was bad. So even with the bad roster, like you said, you talked about stumbling into victories. I don't. The league is good teams find out, good coaches, teams/coaches find ways to take those situations and turn them into their favor. And the Lions, I just, Al, you go winless and you got to fire the guy. You have to, but they're not going to. That's the thing.
Yep.
You have to, but they won't.
It's depressing to think about, isn't it? It's essentially going to lead to another loss here. Just like it was the same thing with Matt Patricia. If everybody in their right mind saw after year 2 this was not going to work, yet the Lions ownership, Sheila Ford Hamp, even though it was Martha Firestone Ford who was quote unquote the owner, it was Sheila Ford Hamp who was pulling all the strings, so she was the one who spoke at the press conference. And they brought, even though Patricia had lost the locker room, the fan base had turned on the team, and things were getting ugly. They gave Patricia and Quinn that one more year when they should have cut bait after the second season. They brought them in for year 3. They go on to make draft picks that are screwing over this team to this day because they were desperate to keep their jobs, so they didn't draft a quarterback. And then they end up firing him after Thanksgiving Day. Actually, a year ago this week, they fired Quinn Patricia. So they ended up firing him anyway. So, yeah, this is like, if you know it's not working out, it's not going to work out. You just can't hope. And that's essentially what the Lions ownership has done for regime after regime after regime. They hope they can turn things around, even though all evidence to the contrary says this is going to end badly. And it always ends badly. It's frustrating as a fan to see this. It's NFL teams have started to grasp this, that if it's not working, damn, well, let's just cut bait. It's, we're talking billionaire. We're talking franchises that are worth $2 billion, owners that are worth several $1 billion. A $15 million buyout is freaking chump change. Just do it. Move on.
Al,
that's just how.
We talk a lot on this podcast about we compare, because you and I are old as dirt, so we can compare.
Yes, we are.
Eras. We can compare because we've seen it all. We've seen it. We've 50 years of watching sports. We've seen it all, and we talk a lot about how things have changed and how it's a new era and blah blah blah. We talk about that in every different sport in various different ways. Yeah. One of the things, Al, that has changed in all sports, not just in football, is the myth that for every Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, for every Bill Belichick in New England, for every you name any sort of any coach of any sport who's got any sort of tenure, for every guy like that, coaches. The fallacy is that if you're changing coaches a lot, that it's because you're bad or because you have instability. Look at the Lakers, for example. The Lakers in basketball have continued to have success. They've always been a successful franchise for the most part. Mm-hmm. Very few times have there been a really bad Lakers team. But even in recent years, in most recent years, when they've been once again good again, winning championships and contending, they have gone through a lot of coaches. Mike Brown and now it's there's now of course they're even saying that Vogel might be on the hot seat. I mean, the Lakers have gone through, even during their years of success, have gone through a lot of coaches. So there's this fallacy of, if you're changing coaches, it must mean that something's wrong with your organization. Well, no. You change coaches because you're trying to find the right mix. Yep. And same with any sport, baseball with their managers. Just because you change a lot of times losing teams do. That's true. They will change their coaches and managers frequently. That is true. But it's becoming now where you can change guys. I remember when the Redskins, for example, they went through back in the early 2000s. And now Dan, you can say what you will about Dan Snyder, but he brought in Schottenheimer, gave Schottenheimer 1 year, got rid of him. Brought in Spurrier, which was a mistake, okay? Got rid of him after 2 years, okay? Yep. These are big-name, established coaches. Schottenheimer, big name.
Yep.
Spurrier, big name in college. Didn't work out. Snyder's, again, say what you will, cut bait on these guys without blinking an eye, okay? And, hey, why? Because I'm not sure what happened with Schottenheimer, but obviously Spurrier wasn't a good mix. He wasn't, was a college guy. He wasn't a good mix. They got rid of him and moved on. You mentioned, you were so right when you were talking about Patricia. We as from the outside could see the fracturing of the locker room, the whispers of discontent and whatever, and it just wasn't happening. It wasn't. You could just tell it. It just wasn't happening. It wasn't getting any better. It was never good to begin with, and it never got any better. And you could see it from afar. And once again, the ownership were the last ones to realize, when Sheila made the move last year around this time to get rid of Quinn and Patricia. I'm not going to give her a lot of points for that because everybody in the whole free world knew that had run its course. The Lions don't ever get rid of people until it's just evident to everyone that they
wait too long. Pure and simple.
Yes. And now I'm not suggesting they get rid of Holmes yet. I think Holmes.
And remember, Holmes didn't hire Campbell. Campbell was hired first.
Which another thing you and I talked about, by the way, was that whole thing. So I don't what has Dan Campbell done in the
Other
NFL?
Like kneecaps? Nothing really.
To warrant
this faith. Yeah.
I mean, it's all. I understand it. You hired the guy. You gave him 6 years. You thought he was the guy. Sheila's gonna gush over him. Oh, I love him. Oh, he's just the greatest guy. And oh no, I love him. But you know what? He didn't win a game.
Yeah.
He didn't win a game.
And that sounds just like William Clayford, who wanted to be buddies with his coaches.
17.
And that led us to guys hanging around too long. Again.
He didn't win a preseason game either, by the way. Not that those matter.
Yeah, exactly.
17. You get 17 chances, Al.
Yeah.
17 chances to win a football game. Win one. Just win one.
Yep.
He's not going to do it. Now, here's the worst thing that can. Now, it's already bad enough, but what the absolute worst thing that could happen for the fans is if Campbell does win one game. If he wins one game, seriously, if he wins just one game, he definitely won't be fired. For sure, won't be fired. I don't think he's going to get fired even winning 0 games. Yeah. But if he wins one game, that's going to save his job. I can guarantee you. I really think he's not going to get fired anyway. But if he just wins one game, he has as much job security as Tomlin does at Pittsburgh. If he just wins one game, that's the nightmare for the Lions fans. If Campbell wins one game, the Lions are going to use that one single victory. I'll bet you $100 that they'll use that one single victory to justify bringing him back, and they'll still try to justify bringing him back with 0 wins. But with one, that's all they need.
Oh, God, it's sad to think about that. You're right. That no matter what happens, he's coming back, and they'll use that talent excuse, even though in the NFL, we've talked about it. I just want to go back to where I said I can say what I want about Daniel Snyder. Can I call him a criminal and a sexual predator and a few other things? Or why don't we just go back and talk about coaching quotes like, it's Denny Green, they are who we thought they were, or Jim Moore in playoffs, and, or Herm Edwards and you play the win the game. That's more fun than talking about Dan Campbell failures, but here we are.
Right.
All right, yeah. Before we move off of the pro game, we should touch on Matthew Stafford a little bit, Greg, because that's another topic with this goddamn idiot fan base we have in the Lions. There's a significant portion of the fan base, especially online, who were rooting for Matthew Stafford to win a Super Bowl, even though that means the draft pick would be that much worse for the Lions. So, and as we saw over the first couple months of the season, Greg, Stafford was tearing it up. MVP candidate, toast of the NFL. The media was just genuflecting at Stafford over how he played over the first couple months of the season with the Rams. But over the last 3 games, all losses to the Rams, rumors abound that claim Stafford is nicked up. He's playing through several injuries. He's thrown a pick 6 in 3 straight games. He has he has an even interception to TD ratio. He's thrown 5 TDs to 5 picks over the last 3 games. And he is just making, for every good throw, he's making a stupid throw. And this has a lot of, at least the sane Lion fans saying, well, we've seen this movie before, haven't we? Why is this so shocking to the Rams fan base and to the national media that as the season goes on, Matthew Stafford, especially when the games seem to get more and more important, he just doesn't seem to be up to the task. How many times did we see this with this franchise, Greg, with Stafford just not living up to he's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's not an elite quarterback. And he always came up short in big games. And much like we're talking about with the ownership and Campbell and giving him the benefit of the doubt, the fan base a lot of the fan base used to say gave Stafford the benefit of the doubt, saying, well, he doesn't have enough weapons, or he doesn't have a running game, or the defense is costing them games, or he has a bad offensive coordinator. Yet we're seeing the same stuff with the Rams now. Nobody. What's the old saying? If everybody you run into is an asshole, you're the asshole. This has the same kind of feeling to it with Stafford. If teams don't live up, if whatever team you go to doesn't live up to expectations, maybe you're the cause of it, not the team. So and now now the Rams are starting to struggle. I think they're 7-4. Yeah. That draft pick is now, I think, 23rd overall, which is a much nicer position for the Lions. And if they can get a pick around 20, they might be able to get the quarterback in the future, get a really good piece. So I still can't fathom fans that are rooting for Matthew Stafford because we're seeing the same Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford does Matthew Stafford things. It doesn't make a difference what the color of the uniform is.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad that Stafford got out of Detroit, and one of the reasons why I'm glad is because it enables us now to prove the postulate that you just put forth. I wrote a column in late October saying Sean McVay has a challenge now in front of him to see what he can do with what I call playoff Stafford.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't just playoff Stafford, it's big game Stafford. There are a lot of big games of course, there are a lot of big games in the NFL that are not playoff games. There are a lot of big games that happen in the regular season.
Yeah.
Let's not forget how he just completely went sideways at the end of the 2013 season, which essentially got Schwartz fired. Yeah, I wanted to. This gives us an opportunity now with the good team. Now, everybody always said the Stafford defenders always said,
it wasn't Stafford, it was the Lions. That's what they would always say.
Put him on a good team with a good defense and a good running attack, and let's see what he can do. Okay. The first 6, 7, 8 games of the season, indeed, we did see him play very good football. But like you said, he's also played very good. He would also play very good football for 6, 7, 8 games at a time with the Lions as well.
Yep.
So my thing, the reason I wrote the column in late October wasn't to necessarily hate on Stafford, but was just to kind of slow it down a little bit and say, look, everything's going great now, no question. Because at the time they were really at the peak of their game when I wrote that. But let's just kind of see what clearly to me at the time I thought they were going to be. They may not even make the playoffs the way they're going now, but let's just say they do make the playoffs. My thing was, let's see what McVay, who got to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff of all people, let's see what he can do with big game Stafford. Okay, now all of a sudden, here the Rams are. You mentioned 7-4. So now these last 5 games become very, very crucial.
Yep.
You have to win probably 4 of these 5 games to really feel secure.
Yeah, and they're just hoping to get a wild card this week, so I don't see them beating the Cardinals.
No, they're 2 games behind the Cardinals. Okay.
Yeah.
And they've already lost to the Cardinals once. Okay.
Yep.
So now let's see. And now we're already seeing, you mentioned that he's nicked up and he's got this and he's got that, and which is another thing. That's another thing I tweeted out, and Kenny Cal said, well, he'll be fine. He's tough. I said, no, I'm not saying he's going to sit down. I'm not saying he's going to miss any games. But what I'm saying is you're starting to see already a little bit of this. Well, he's hurt now, and you mentioned the 5 TDs.
The excuses are starting to come. 5
TDs versus 5 interceptions thing you just mentioned. I just want to see what McVay does with this guy now, who now that the pressure's being ratcheted up. Okay, this is the pressure level goes up now. And this is not October or September anymore. This is December, okay? And this is a playoff push, okay? This is a guy who's not only has he not won a playoff game, but there's been some big regular season games where he has not played well. So I want to see, with his great teammates he's got and his great defense and his runners and all his receivers and all these weapons, they brought in all these people to help him. Okay. Now I want to see what he does with that. I think it's fair. I'm not a Stafford hater. Okay. My thing with Stafford, Al, has always been, let's not give him a free pass. I don't think you can just say, well, he didn't have this, he didn't have that, it's the Lions, and, well, okay. Now he's with L.A. Now he's with the Rams now. Much better team. 5 games here. Let's see what happens. That's all I'm going to say. If he goes out there and wins 4 or 5 of those,
make me eat my words. Exactly.
I'll buy it. But all I'm saying is it's fair to ask the question. Some people think you can't even ask that question. When I wrote that column back in late October, I took some flack on Twitter. Oh, well, you come on now. You please, really? You really think, come on now. Okay. I think it's fair to ask the question. He's where you wanted him to be. He's got all these things you said he didn't have with the Lions. Okay. He didn't have a running game. He didn't have this. He didn't have that. The Lions are cursed. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now he's out of that situation. Mm-hmm. Well, the Rams are 7-4. 5 games to go. Let's see what happens. That's all I'm saying. Now, if he goes out there and runs the table, good on him. If he goes out there and does what he's done the last few weeks, I'm not gonna take pleasure in that. I'm just gonna say that, okay, guys, this is what you wanted. Your Stafford defenders, your staunch Stafford defenders wanted to see this scenario. This is a scenario that everybody was, this imaginative, hypothetical scenario that people have been talking about for 10 years with him is finally here. Now let's see what he does with it. And it's fair to ask that question. And it's fair to just kind of just sit back, everybody, Stafford haters, Stafford defenders, people like me who are kind of both, let's just watch it play out.
Yeah, it's one of the things that always gets me about when it comes to the Stafford defenders, it's like, the 2014 playoff game in Dallas. There's so many fans that, they lost that game because the referees picked up the pass interference flag, and that's why they lost the game. They always forget to mention there was 8 minutes left to play in that game, and Stafford didn't do dick.
Hasn't he?
The rest of that game.
Hasn't he thrown 3 pick sixes in the last 3 games?
Yeah. Or how about that playoff game against New Orleans a few years ago?
Yeah.
If you look at
the
numbers, it looks like Stafford had an awesome game. But almost all those numbers were put up after the Lions were down like 30 points in the game.
In Seattle, in that playoff game in Seattle, Al, he had Anquan Bolden. He had Golden Tate. He had Marvin Jones Jr. Okay. I'm not sure the running backs were. They probably weren't any good. But he had those 3 receivers. And Seattle's it was a good team. I get it. They're on the road. I understand that. It's a tough place to play in the playoff. I understand. You just sooner or later you gotta just say, maybe he's a certain level, and that's all he is. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's a lot of good. He's not a Hall of Famer. There's a lot of good quarterbacks who are not Hall of Famers who are good quarterbacks. Yeah. But I mean, I get a little irritated with people who just think you can't even ask the question. You can't even hint that he was even part of it. Remote. Now, I'm already seeing it too, by the way, and you've probably seen it too.
Yeah.
With this season now, and you still think it was Matthew Stafford? It's apples. We're not just. You can do 2 things at once. You can critique Stafford and still acknowledge that this team stinks. It's not. I think even people like me who were not really necessarily Stafford haters understood that it wasn't. No, it's true. It wasn't just him, clearly. But don't try to look at this 0-10. Don't hold the 0-10-1 up as proof that Stafford is this, that you can't critique Stafford, and that he had nothing to do, zero to do with what went on with the. You can't be quarterback of a team in the NFL for 12 years.
12 years with the Lions. This is his 13th season. And
get a free and just be blamed. Just be Teflon. And so no, it's not
the Teflon quarterback. That's a good point.
Not the quarterback. Right. It's not the quarterback. You can't do that. You can't. You can't go 12 years as a quarterback and just say, "Well, it wasn't him."
Yeah,
it's not him. For sure it isn't him. You can't do that.
Oh God, yeah. Okay, it's going to be. I'm curious to see how the rest of the season plays out for the Rams. 1, because the Stafford stuff we're talking about. 2, just where that draft pick ends up falling, because where that draft pick ends, those 2 Rams draft picks end up in the first round over the next 2 years, could play a huge difference on the direction of the Lions franchise if they're able to get the right players. They cannot screw those picks up, which is another whole discussion that I'm sure we'll have in a few months. But it's just fascinating to see. It's deja vu all over again, as they say. All right, before we start wrapping things up, Greg, let's talk about this past weekend in the NCAA, in the football, as they say, which was rivalry weekend. Say that fast 3 times. And for everything that's wrong with college football, which we will discuss in a sec, this past weekend was everything that is really, really cool with college football. I mean, Michigan, for example. Michigan finally beat. Before you get to Michigan, first off, we got to give a shout out to all 6 D1 schools in the state of Michigan, including friend of the show Chris Creighton and the Eastern Michigan Eagles, who all have winning records and are all bowl eligible. The 3 MAC teams and the 2 Big Ten teams. We've seen some great football in the state this year. We really have. But going back with what happened this past weekend, you had a crazy emotional Michigan, and trash-talking Jim Harbaugh returned. And that was literally an exorcism of 10 years worth of OSU demons, of losses, of OSU just crapping all over Michigan. And they won that game in just glorious fashion. They're headed to the Big Ten championship game with a clear shot at the playoffs. I mean, they need to beat Iowa, and Iowa sucks. That's just how bad the Big West is. So all of a sudden, Harbaugh, who everybody wanted to fire a year ago, and Michigan preached patience. He restructured his contract, and now he's likely going to make it to the college football playoff after all hell broke loose last year. Patience paid off for Michigan. You had the Spartans, Greg, who are likely headed to a New York Six Bowl. They won a Snow Bowl game against Penn State, where you couldn't even see Penn State's players because they were dressed in all white. And there was like 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground. It was an awesome game to watch. It wasn't a great game, but it was one of those experience. It was a great experience to see that going on. You had the Iron Bowl where Alabama barely survived Auburn in 4 overtimes. That game was crazy. Bedlam, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State was literally bedlam. Both teams made incredible and incredibly stupid plays in the game, constantly in that game. That game went to the last minute, and Oklahoma State won. You had Ed Orgeron, who got a $15 million buyout to leave LSU to only 2 years after winning the national title, knocked off Texas A&M to qualify LSU for a bowl game that Orgeron won't even coach yet because he's gone. He's been fired. Iowa backed into the Big Ten championship game because Minnesota and PJ Roll the Boat Fleck upset Wisconsin in a ridiculous game. It was a ridiculously entertaining Saturday in college football. And, it's as much as I rag on what's wrong with the NCAA and college football in general, days like that is why people love the game and why people are fans of the schools, even if they didn't go to those schools. It was just such a fun day of football that's why college football is such a big deal. It's a hugely flawed enterprise. There is so much wrong with it. But the games themselves, the experience, it's an event. It's a big deal on all these small town campuses. It was just a great football day, and I just spent the entire day on the couch flipping from right after the Michigan game. I watched all the way through, just flipping from game to game to game and being hugely entertained. And it was just. And I know college football as an enterprise is awful, but the games themselves was so much fun to watch. I really had a hell of a time.
Yeah, I mean, the Michigan Ohio State game was, I think, so important for these rivalries that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It was so. Somebody mentioned it on Twitter too, that it was so important that the Michigan win that game to try to inject some sort of life back into it. It didn't
feel like a rivalry anymore. It felt like Ohio State was a hammer and Michigan was a nail.
Right, and it was and they beat a good Ohio State team. It wasn't like they beat Ohio State when they were kind of having.
And it wasn't a fluke either.
Right,
it's not a fluke.
And they answered every time Ohio State looked like they were going to get back in the game. Michigan would answer right back. Ohio State had no solution for Michigan defensively. Yeah. They were just.
It was literally Michigan said, "We're going to run the ball and we're going to dare you to stop us," and they couldn't stop them, which made it. How often do you see that anymore? A team just say, "We're going to run it up the gut, and we know you can't stop us, and we're going to keep doing it," and that hardly ever happens anymore because it's become such a passing game anymore. So those kind of games really become. They stand out more because you don't see that kind of ball that much anymore. And that's right. Harbaugh. That's how Harbaugh always wanted his team to play.
Right. Yeah.
Out-tough people, and they out-toughed Ohio State.
Yeah. I think I was most impressed with how they didn't buckle when it looked like the Buckeyes might.
Or that pick that Cade Cunningham threw in the first half. They go, that's where you would immediately think as a Michigan fan, oh shit, here it's just going to come tumbling down.
Yeah.
And Michigan just shrugged it off, got a stop, and scored again.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, everything you said about the crazy weekend and all the rivalries and everything.
That's Cade McNamara. Cade Cunningham plays basketball. So.
Well, I knew who you meant.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
But yeah. So it really is good for college football when these rivalries don't become terribly one-sided. Now, Michigan, you got to give them all the credit in the world. I mean, this was after I saw them kind of fade in the second half against Michigan State, I said, oh boy, I think I was really impressed with how they just did not mentally break down. You knew Ohio State was going to keep coming. Yep. And Ohio State, of course, has that mentality, of course, that they're going to beat Michigan no matter what. Yep. And you mentioned in the show notes about exercising demons. And it really, when you get a rivalry that gets to be one-sided like that, it becomes almost more mental than anything else. That mental thing creeps in. And
you play scared that one mistake's going to just cause it all to fall apart. That's what would always happen. Yeah.
The weather wasn't great, and Ohio State kept coming, and but Michigan, when they needed to, got the stops defensively, and Ohio State, when they needed to, did not get the stops defensively. Yep. So that game was on the Ohio State defense. They just couldn't stop them, and you got the feeling though that if they could have gotten a stop, Ohio State, that they may have gone down the field and tied the football game, but Michigan just wouldn't let that happen. Right. They didn't play not to lose. That was the other thing I liked. They kept the pedal to the metal. Right. Harbaugh did not get conservative. He didn't try to not lose, which kudos to him and his coaching staff. They saw weakness in Ohio State and exploited it and kept going to it and didn't go into a shell. Didn't try to play a field position game or do anything cute like that.
Didn't run a draw on 3rd and 32.
Yeah. Just, right down the field. And the quarterback was poised. And the receivers made great plays. And Hutchinson, of course,
defensively. The other thing you got to mention is you love it when you see great players play great in huge games. Right. So that was Aiden Hutchinson for Michigan, their defensive end. Right. That kid he lived in Ohio State's backfield. In that game. He lived there. Yeah. He was literally a disruptive force, and there's nothing they could do to stop him.
Those are the kind of games, Al, for a college football player. Those are the kind of games that elevate your draft stock immensely.
He's a first-round pick. So now it's just a matter, is he going to go number one now?
I remember when the Lions drafted Sue in 2010.
And he had that huge game.
Oh, the Orange Bowl. I think it was some bowl game. He just was literally unstoppable.
He was unstoppable. Yeah.
And nobody could block him. And it was almost that game is what really elevated him to the level that he was. And this game that Hutchinson had, he didn't do it in Wisconsin. He did it against Ohio State on a big stage. Those are the kind of games that that kid may have just earned himself another several $100,000 at least.
I would say more than that.
Right.
Probably the difference between being the 5th overall pick and the top
just
pick.
Just by virtue of that game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons he came back. He would have been a first-round pick last year, even though he broke his ankle and missed most of the season. But he came back, one, because he thought he could increase his draft stock to a high first-round pick, and also he wanted to beat Ohio State. And he pulled off both, and you got to give all credit to the kid. He bet on himself, and he won.
Right.
So much like Jim Harbaugh, he bet on himself by taking a pay cut, and he won. And we also need to bring up, as we talked about before we started recording, that Harbaugh's contract, essentially he was making $8 million. He took a pay cut to $4 million, and then he could make the other $3 to $4 million in incentives by like winning the division, winning the Big Ten championship game, going to the playoffs, blah blah blah. And Harbaugh yesterday announced any of those incentives he earns this year, he's going to donate back to the athletic department so they can pay back employees who took pay cuts during the COVID season last year. And they took like 50% pay cuts. All of a sudden, Harbaugh is like, when you see what else is going on in college football, then you see Harbaugh doing what Harbaugh's doing. It's like, well, Michigan all of a sudden feels they dodged a bullet by not getting rid of Harbaugh. He's he's a weird guy, but he genuinely loves the school. He's put roots there. He's a hell of a coach. Even though he had trouble beating Ohio State, save for the COVID year, you could write down 9 or 10 wins in stone with him, which you couldn't do over the past 15 years of Michigan. And all of a sudden, Harbaugh is coming out, spelled like a rose after everything that happened last year. It's hard. That's just how weird college football can be. And then we need to talk about, as I mentioned, the bad part of college football, Greg. It's become, it's no longer about school. It's not about the kids. It's not about school. It's about money. And the coaching carousel is spun out of control this past weekend. This past week, MSU gave Mel Tucker a 10-year, $95 million extension to keep him away from Florida and LSU. Right. James Franklin, who's only like 7-4 this year, I think over the past year and a half, he's 500. He got a 10-year, $70 million extension from Penn State to keep him away from some of the other SEC schools. The USC poached Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma, who has made the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 or 5 years. But they paid him the goddamn GNP of a small country, well over $100 million, to go into Pac-12 and coach for USC. Get out of the, because he does to get away from the SEC, because that's where Oklahoma's heading. And then this is the most shocking one: is LSU got Brian Kelly from Notre Dame. You don't leave Notre Dame. That's a destination job. You get to Notre Dame. That's the pinnacle of the profession. That's like Ohio State. That's like Michigan. That's like Alabama. That's like you don't leave Notre Dame. You either get fired or you can retire from Notre Dame. Yet LSU got Brian Kelly, who of Grand Valley and Central Michigan fame, to leave Notre Dame, and he has the most wins in Notre Dame history. And he could make the college football playoff if he gets a couple breaks, if Michigan or Oklahoma State or Cincy loses. But he took 10 years, I think it's $95 million, with well over 100 if he meets his incentives. Then he got Cincinnati, who was in the playoffs I think they're like number 4 in the playoff rankings right now. Cincinnati with Luke Fickell. He's considered maybe the favorite for the Notre Dame job. So it's entirely possible Cincinnati and Notre Dame could make the college football playoff and have interim coaches, which is absolutely insane. Florida and Virginia Tech have canned coaches and hired new ones. Miami, Oklahoma, Notre Dame are now in a problem for coaches. Those are all blue blood schools. And Nick Saban is going to get a raise because his contract says he needs to be paid at least as much as the average of the top 3 coaches in the SEC or in the nation, whichever number is greater. The money being thrown around at the Power 5 level, Greg, is absolutely insanely mind-boggling at this point. And it's hard to believe that people were upset about the players getting a few $1,000 off their naming rights, the NIL rights. Yet, and transfer. God forbid you let them transfer, which thank God they can do now with the transfer portal. But fans got upset about that, about the players, while coaches and administrators and schools are just throwing around billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's absolutely, it's insanity. It makes the NFL look completely insane. What's going on in college basketball right now?
Well, sooner rather than later.
The bubble's going to burst. I just don't know when.
Right. Well, sooner rather than later, we're all going to have to just, this isn't your father's college athletics anymore.
Yeah, this is not where Bo Schembechler turned down $250,000 to go to Texas A&M.
Right. Yeah. I see people on Facebook, and social media lamenting, it's gone. We just have to sooner rather than later understand that college athletics is that in name only. I mean, it's a bastardized professional operation. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say that, I know I'm not referring to the coaches. I understand. I know they're professionals. What I'm saying is, it's the whole thing. It's lost its innocence of being this, more wholesome, kind of like how high school football was looked at, as being Friday night and, wholesome and true athletes students who happen to be athletes and so forth. We just have to, with between the one and done athletes in college basketball and the 2 and outs, a lot of times, sometimes in football, the money that's being thrown around to these coaches like we're talking about, the big TV contracts and so forth. And, we just have to just let go of that fantasy that college football is anything other than a big time industry. It's a
professional sport. It is.
An industry.
Yeah.
And obviously it's the allegiance to teams still is largely driven by alumni, for sure. I mean, everybody roots for their school, no matter how big or small the school is. But we just have to just let go of this. Just stop fighting it. Just stop complaining. Just accept. We have to accept it. That big time coaches are going to get big time money. They're going to move around. They're going to get poached. Yep. They're going to go from one job to the next. And I don't want people to think that because of that these coaches are any less committed to the kids that they do coach, because I think it's still about coaching kids. It's about money, of course. I understand that, but you're good wherever you go. You're going to be coaching young men. It's not like you're.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still, whether you coach at Notre Dame or whether you coach at Siena Heights or you coach at Portland State or you coach at Southern Alabama, you're still coaching athletes that are 18 to 21 years old, okay? You're still coaching kids. And I like to think that is still what drives these coaches, I don't care how much money they're making, to do what they're doing. I know it's easy to look at this cynically and say, well, what are you talking about? They're not in it for the kids. They're in it for the money. Well, would you turn that money down if somebody said to you, I mean, no, of course you wouldn't. Okay. Now, what gets a little bit off-putting is when, like in Mel Tucker's case, it seems like Tucker leveraged. You mentioned at the top of the discussion about Michigan State being afraid he was going to leave. Leveraging. Here's where it gets a little bit sticky. Leveraging other schools' interest in him to get lots and lots more money and lots of more years. Now, this is a guy, Al. Mel Tucker, yes, he's coached at Michigan State before as an assistant. I understand that. But Mel Tucker has not been the head coach of Michigan State for a million years. I mean, this isn't. It's not
he's just ending his second season.
So, I mean, more power to the guy. If Michigan State was that scared of losing Mel Tucker, now with all due respect to Mel Tucker, he hasn't done a thing at Michigan State. He really hasn't.
Yeah.
And it's why? Because he hasn't been there long enough. Doesn't mean he's not a good coach. All I know is that he got his butt handed to him against the Buckeyes, and Harbaugh beat the Buckeyes. I'll leave that there. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what the question I would ask, Al, is why was Michigan State so worried about losing Mel Tucker? Again, all due respect to Coach Tucker, but he's not Duffy Daugherty. He's not the second coming of Mark D'Antonio. Why were they so scared of losing Mel Tucker that they would go 9 or 10 years and $1 bajillion to keep the guy on campus? That's what I don't understand. I understand the big names, the guys that, the Sabans of the world, and guys who've been successful a long time at schools that move around. They're going to get the big money. I get it. But Mel Tucker, again, with all due respect, he was a coach at Colorado for a little while. Coach at Michigan State, like you said, this is his second year, first full year, really, because last year was COVID. And Michigan State gets so spooked that he's going to leave that they break the bank open. That's what I don't understand. I'm all for guys making money and getting whatever money they can. I'm not against that necessarily. I just don't know what Michigan State was thinking. You know, I don't understand why they were so afraid of losing this guy. Yes, they're having a good year. Yes, that's true. But they got bitch slapped against the Buckeyes.
Yep.
And
that game was embarrassing. That was embarrassing.
I mean, I don't know if it's because he didn't have the team ready to play or what, but that was unbelievable. It was like they were playing. Ohio State was playing, Northwestern or something. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't know what they were so afraid of.
Oh yeah, it's it's just crazy. It's a stupid amount of money to coach football. I'm with you. I've always said, just admit it. It's not about school. It's not about educating kids. It's about making money. Making money for the institutions, making money for NCAA, making money for the TV networks, making money for the coaches. And if the players get a couple grand here or there, well, great for them. So, but yeah, it's, as much as I enjoy college football, I have to compartmentize that. Boy, this is a really awful thing how this game is handled. Yet I watch, just like the NFL. NFL is awful. I still watch. MLB is awful, but I still watch.
But you know what, Al? I think where it gets untoward. Now, you mentioned Chris Creighton, okay? A guy like that who's kind of worked his way up. He was coach at Drake. Nobody knows where Drake is except the people who go to Drake. Goes from Drake.
Where is Drake?
I think it's in Iowa.
That's Iowa. Yeah, it's Iowa. I had to think about that for a sec.
Okay, moves from Drake. He goes to Eastern, and we've talked about, will he go somewhere else? Well, Eastern extended him over the summer. Okay.
Yeah.
Guys who Brian Kelly did the same thing. You mentioned he was in the MAC and so forth, and even D'Antonio was at Cincinnati.
Right.
Okay. It's one thing to see these coaches kind of go up the ladder, if you will. Small school, bigger school. Okay.
Right.
Where it gets a little bit, I think, where people get a little bit off put is when guys make seemingly lateral moves. You go from one big school to another big school, where the big school that you're going to doesn't necessarily, at first blush, I can see going from Drake to Eastern, or from Eastern to, Illinois and whatever you want to call it,
right,
Minnesota. Yeah. And I can see the Brian Kelly's career trajectory, but I don't know a guy leaving a big school and he's already making $1 bajillion, going to another big school to make $1 billion.
$1,000,000,001, essentially. Yeah.
That's where you can legitimately ask the question, okay, what are you doing this for? Right. Why are you leaving? And then you've got a lot of scumbags like Bobby Petrino, guys who Daryl Rogers, who just chase opportunities just for the sake of doing it. Nick Saban, people in the NFL hated Nick Saban because of the way he was. And Spurrier was the same way.
Yep.
A lot of these guys are not very well liked among their brethren, and the coaching fraternity is generally a pretty tight one. Coaches generally like each other. They stick up for each other. They have a common bond. You rarely see coaches badmouth other coaches. I mean, it's a fraternity. Yep. But some guys just are so disliked that they're just, so. But again, I don't know. As long as these schools as long as a school like Michigan State is going to buckle at the knees at the mere thought of Mel Tucker leaving for heaven forbid.
Who has like a career 15-13 record or something like that.
Oh my God, we can't let this guy go.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to build a statue of him? What's next? A statue in front of Spartan Stadium? I don't get it. I
don't even get me going on giving coaches statues. Yeah, it worked well for Penn State. So, but yeah, it's college football, great sport. As an industry, it's awful. And as you said, this past weekend really just showed us how craven it really is. All right, we got to start wrapping things up. As usual, we've gone long, and we haven't talked in a month, so we had a lot to cover. So who's your jerk of the week?
I'm going to go with, we all saw what happened between LeBron James and Isaiah Stewart at Little Caesars Arena a couple weeks ago. Okay. And obviously Stewart was out of control, no question about it.
Yeah. Oh, it was glorious he was so out of control.
Yeah. But my beef, my jerk of the week is going to the media and the fans who, for whatever reason, brought up the Malice at the Palace.
Oh, yeah.
And the scene of, first of all, it's not the scene of Malice at the Palace. Malice at the Palace is at the Palace. I mean, this is Little Caesar's Arena. Two different arenas, number one. Number two, they're not the same thing. The Malice at the Palace thing was fans getting involved with the players and players going into the stands.
Right.
And just because a guy loses his control of himself on the floor going after another player, the Malice at the Palace thing was never the Pacers and the Pistons going at it. It was Ron Artest going at it with the fan. It wasn't Artest versus Rasheed Wallace or Artest versus anybody.
Yeah, exactly. That was all on the Pacers.
So
don't get me going on that.
So people bring up this Malice at the Palace thing again, like it's part two. Come on now.
Yeah.
This was a guy who lost his temper and went after another player. Now, in fact, it was LeBron James. I understand.
That made it even better if you ask me.
But I mean, you don't dredge up that thing at the Palace 17 years ago and try to draw some sort of a parallel, or this was like Detroit's known for this or something. I mean, come on now.
Yeah. What was that? What, 16 years, 17 years ago? Like that? Yeah.
And it was fans against players. It wasn't the Pacers against the Pistons. This was Stewart versus James. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't. How you can even draw a comparison just because it was the same franchise. So my jerk of the week are these people who felt they needed to dredge up Malice at the Palace again, and somehow try to inject that into what happened between Stewart and James.
Yeah, that's it was something to watch, but yeah, it was. I think the best line I saw, at the very least, if you're going to bring up that, call it Malice at the Pizza Palace or something. But yeah, I'm with you there, and I hate this revisionist history at Malice at the Palace. That was all on the Pacers. I mean, the documentary now at Netflix, I will not watch it because it's it completely tries to exonerate the Pacers when they were the instigators of the whole goddamn thing. I watched it happen live on television. That was 100%. Well, I'll go 95% Pacers, 5% fans. But then again, you can say it's 100% Pacers because nothing happens if Artest doesn't run into the stands. Then all hell breaks loose. So
why was he laying on the scorer's table to begin with?
Because he is a shit stirrer essentially. But yeah, if he doesn't lay on the scorer's table, then the beer doesn't come down and hit him in the chest, and then he doesn't go running into the stands. It's all on the fucking Pacers. Pardon my French. So yeah, that's a good call on that. It's happened in the past, and seeing that even brought up because two players are in a fight, or actually, it wasn't even a fight. It was it was Isaiah Stewart looking like Rod Allen in Japan, was what it looked like. So
I forgot about that.
That clip is always gold, and I need to watch that.
How about the clip of McClendon pulling up first base from the and carrying it off, or second base and carrying it off the field with him. Oh
God! All right, I wasn't sure where I was going to go find jerk of the week, Greg, because I was thinking, of course, Aaron Rodgers with the "I'm immunized" bit, where it turned out he just didn't want to admit that he was an anti-vaxxer, and that whole clusterfuck that happened over the past month that we missed out on, thank goodness. But I'm going to keep it a little lighter because we've done so much COVID talk. And my jerk of the week, since we talked about Matthew Stafford, my jerk of the week is, let's go with Matthew Stafford's wife, Kelly.
Oh boy!
Who a couple weeks ago got so angry at a fan that was shit talking her husband, she threw a pretzel at him.
Oh, that's right.
During a game. A game the Rams lost 31-10. But I guess per TMZ, there were some rude fans sitting behind Stafford's wife, Kelly, and at the 49ers game, and they started talking some shit. So she flung a soft pretzel back towards them. No one was hurt. No one was. People moved and the whole nine thing. But it was just another incident of Matthew Stafford's wife being a Karen. Her true colors, Greg, really came out early in the pandemic. a year and a half ago.
Right.
When she claimed that the governor was a dictator for some of the mandates we were dealing with at the time.
Yeah.
And that right there is like, okay, she's an entitled asshole, because none of what happened during the pandemic affected a person like her.
Right.
Tons of money.
Yeah.
The best medical care available.
Yeah.
Her husband was working, but it had every avenue to be protected, unlike first responders and nurses and doctors and everything else. And she was complaining about calling Michigan a dictatorship. So my jerk of the week is Kelly Stafford, who has finally shown her true colors over the past couple of years, that she is your typical entitled Karen, and she is an awful person, and I'm glad she's gone. And hopefully we'll never, ever have to talk about Kelly Stafford ever again.
You think that, if she's nothing, she's loyal to her husband. I guess you could say that for her. But you think that she would be a little bit calmer after having. Didn't she have brain cancer or some sort of brain?
Yes, she did.
Tumor or something.
And she at that point when she had, it was a brain tumor, I believe.
Okay, tumor, cancer. Not cancer, right?
But she had gotten some of the, because she had a reputation of making assholish comments, if to defend her man, and she came off very sympathetic during that medical issue. But then once she recovered, she turned right back into her Karen self.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Doesn't usually something like that change? I don't know if she was necessarily near death. I'm not going to go that far, but something like that kind of shakes you up a little bit, because it makes you maybe appreciate things a little bit more. Maybe you kind of tone it down a little bit. You survive this tumor thing, and that can be scary. And you think that she'd have a different perspective on life in general for having gone through that, maybe not letting certain things bother her as much, that kind of a thing. We'll just kind of tone it down a little bit, but it doesn't seem to have done that. So
I would just say my advice is find yourself who loves you as much as Kelly Stafford loves throwing pretzels. I guess we'll put it that way. All right, with that, Greg, let's get the hell out of here, because we've probably run way long in this podcast. So if you get out the thank yous and the what fors, and if there's anything coming up on the show, and the social media for that matter.
Yep. Not sure about guests. We'll see. We're going to be with you again on December the 14th, so we'll see what we have cooking. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the New Jerks, of course. Read me on my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, if you would, please, every Monday. I'd appreciate that. I want to thank my lovely wife, Sharon, for putting up with this every week or every other week, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday nights so gosh darn fun.
Yes, and to get a shout-out, thank you, Greg, for allowing me to miss that last week, because I landed. We were going to record on a Wednesday. I landed on Wednesday, but I landed at like 6 o'clock in the evening. So it would have been. I don't think it would have been a very good podcast if we had managed to record. So Greg said, "The hell with it. Let's take the week off." So we did. So thank you for that. Give a shout out to Linda, who's actually off tonight because her schedule has changed because of all the crap that's going on in the hospitals right now. So, but she's home resting after working some shitty shifts. So more power to her. Give a shout out. How's Beaton, by the way? How's the boy doing?
Oh, he's just.
I see pictures on Facebook where it looks like all he's thinking about right now is leftover turkey. I think that's true.
He's something else, yeah.
All right. If you want to listen to the show, as always, we're available at the usual places: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. TheKneeJerks.net is the mothership. It's the homepage. That's where you can directly download the MP3 to do what you will with it. You can find the show pretty much any place podcasts are aggregated. Just type in The Knee Jerks or The Knee Jerks, Eno and Big Al, Eno and Big Al. Any of those should get you to be able to subscribe to the show. As I say, subscribe, hit like, leave a comment, hit the bell, punch the button, whatever it is you do. The kids do today on social media. That's what we would like you to do as well. So, thanks again. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and hopefully, we probably won't have any baseball to talk about, but we'll probably have some Wigs and Pistons and Lions to discuss. So, until that time, 2 weeks from today, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.